What's going on with the Booker Prize of late? Okay, a couple of days ago on the 23rd, they announced their 2025 shortlist. And to be really as polite as I can be on this channel about it, it was met with a degree of confusion from some pundits. And to be blunt about it, I've had people asking me, where do we start the riots? This has led me to wonder, is the Booker Prize actively trying to promote bad books, or is there something we are not understanding about them and their process? And while personally I am more than a little bit disappointed with this year's short and long list, and I've not tried to hide that, I'm not at any point saying that the judges are trying to sabotage this prize. That would just be conspiracy theory madness. They are clearly putting up the books that they think are best for the prize. It's up to us to figure out why. But why? The majority of Book Prize superfans who have read this year's long list prior to the shortlist being announced had glowing praise for two books, Sea Scraper and Endlings, and both of these books surprisingly missed the cut. As somebody who has read a lot of Book Prize long lists, I can tell you it's almost always a mixed experience. If you ever find a Book Prize long list where you love all 12 to 16 books, you make sure to buy that Book Prize flowers and take it out for dinner at least once a week. You meet its mother. But regardless of what you think of a long list, the shortlist is almost always better. Yet in this case, there is an unusually large amount of people saying that the Booker Prize shortlist for 2025 is worse than the Booker Prize long list. And I think that goes against the basic expectation we as readers have, that within any given Book Prize's niche, that the best books are going to be listed, that the winner will be better than the shortlist, that the shortlist will be better than the long list. The problem with that statement is, what does better mean? If this year we had read exactly the same books, I guarantee you if I picked my favourite and you picked your favourite, they'd be different. We wouldn't agree on which books were better and which books weren't. That's just normal. What makes a book good to any given reader depends on so many things that are very personal. The books we have previously read, our knowledge, our experience, the mood we are in at the time, the things we find easier to empathize with. And that is one of the really beautiful things about reading, that we all have different experiences in which to translate a novel and which to understand it. And that means that really there's not that many books that are actually bad. Most bad books are actually bad fits for the reader. So the idea of a book being better is really subjective. Can we say that, we just don't agree with the judges this year? They like one thing, we like the other. Well, sure we could, but the idea that better is completely subjective is not quite true as well. Even if Frida McFadden and James Patterson converted to writing the best literary fiction they could, we know that those authors are never going to win the Booker Prize. And I'm not saying that just to throw shade on Frida McFadden and James Patterson. Okay, maybe I'm doing it a little bit. Maybe quite a bit. Maybe like 75% or 90%. Anyway, shade aside, I am trying to demonstrate that while there can be a diversity of opinions on what better is, it's not actually a completely random mess. There is still an order to things. And there is a large consensus on at least what a quality book is not. The opposite to that can also be true. If we look at last year's Booker Prize, a large number of readers were predicting that Percival Everett's novel James would win the Booker Prize, and that was even before the long list was announced. Now, it didn't end up winning, but it did make the shortlist. And when you look at the other books on the shortlist, you can see it doesn't completely stylistically fit with those other books. James is a bit of an oddball in comparison to the last six. And that's probably because last year we had judges who really had a preference for atmospheric writing, and therefore the eventual winner, Orbital, makes a whole lot more sense than James. James is a brilliant novel. The judges recognised that, even if it did miss out on winning. While Orbital does generate a broader range of opinions. However, as somebody who didn't particularly enjoy it, I can understand why the judges picked it as their winner. And there is a massive difference between saying, it's a book with qualities that aren't for me, and I don't understand what the qualities of this book are. Now, what I have found really strange this year is that, yes, there are a lot of people bewildered at the shortlist this year. There are a lot of people saying that they do not like it. But on the flip side, there is a not insignificant number of people saying it is the strongest long list in a long, long time. And if it was a poor long list, I go back to being really, really confused. It does lend itself to the point of view that these must be books that we are not getting the qualities of. There has to be something fundamentally different between the people who rate this year's Booker Prize and the people who think it is a stinker. What is that difference of opinion? What is that difference of value? Now, I have a claim to make. If you think about the Women's Prize for Fiction and the Booker Prize for Fiction, and you think about which prize you enjoy more, if you answer that with the Women's Prize for Fiction, I'm going to say you probably are struggling with this year's Booker. As a side note, I'm not claiming the opposite of this statement is true. If you prefer the Booker Prize or even think the two prizes are about equal, I think that that's a complex situation. I'm not saying the opposite is true at all. But if you like the Women's Prize more than the Booker Prize, I don't think you like this year's Booker. The Women's Prize tends to value the traditional aspects of a novel. Characters, plot, atmosphere, prose, and the discussion around themes and ideas. And if you're a regular viewer of this channel, you've probably noticed that these are the 5 elements that I keep coming back to when I'm reviewing a book. The Women's Prize also values books being accessible, although I think that is completely irrelevant to the reason this year's Booker Prize doesn't work for some people. I reject the idea that accessibility is the reason people are not enjoying the Booker Prize. I think the reason they're not enjoying the Booker Prize this year is because they're bored. I think that because that's what they're saying. And I think that there's a big change in how the Booker Prize is looking at those 5 elements. They're looking at how they're constructed. If you like, they're looking at the bricks and mortar used and the techniques rather than the final structure created. This year's shortlist is inviting readers to have a meta discussion about books. The way Katie Kitamura creates characters in auditions is unusual and it's polarizing. Andrew Miller's hyper-focus on the minutiae of life is mundane to some readers but atmospheric to others. David Sasley forces his reader to fill in large chunks of his plot, pushing the narrative forward multiple years at a time, intentionally leaving things unexplored and keeping us distant from his protagonist. Another very polarizing characteristic of this year's shortlist. And in picking these 3 novels, I've picked one book that I enjoyed, one book that I found readable but ultimately naff, and one book that I thought was one of the worst books I've read this year, shortlist or no. But do I think that Auditions had well-constructed characters? Do I think that Flesh had a well-constructed plot? Do I think The Land in Winter had a well-constructed setting? No. No, I don't think any of them could be successful in those aspects of the novel. This is a shortlist for people who want to ask questions around what makes a good book. How could characters be created differently? How does a plot limit a novel? Is setting an undervalued aspect of a book? Is the reflection of a theme in the way the book is crafted of value to the reader? If I look at the 5 books on this year's shortlist that I have read, I'm not going to read Sonia and Sunny because of the release date, but that is a completely different issue. If I look at those 5 books, not one of them is good as a traditional plot, character, setting, prose novel. That is not the same as saying it is a bad book. That is saying that the value in the book doesn't lie in how those aspects are crafted. They are good for the ideas they implant in the reader's head. They are good for the conversations they begin. This is a shortlist that has rewarded fiction that breaks the mold or extends the possibilities of the novel form. And yes, I did just steal the tagline from the Goldsmith Prize, because that is what this year's shortlist is. It is a typical Goldsmith Prize shortlist, and that is why we're seeing such a polarizing reaction to this year's Booker Prize. We are seeing a rejection of the traditional and conservative values of literature, and instead seeing a preference for books that play with the way the novel communicates to the reader. We are seeing books that might be influential or interesting historically, but we are not seeing well executed novels. And if the Booker Prize continues on this path, we won't be seeing modern day greats on the long list such as Kazuo Ishiguro, Maggie O'Farrell, Ian McEwan, Margaret Atwood or Sarah Waters, and it means that we're more likely to see authors such as Rachel Cusk, Ali Smith, Benjamin Myers, Claire Louise Bennett and Lucy Ellman. And some readers are going to love that while other readers won't, and hence we have a reason for our difference of opinion. I'm going to put my hand up here. I'm completely biased. I definitely prefer Kazuo Ishiguro and Maggie O'Farrell to Rachel Cusk and Ali Smith. But I always consider the Booker Prize to be about balancing an excellent of craft with an innovative novel. And the trouble is, if the Booker invests too much on the innovative side, it no longer becomes a prize for the best book out there. It loses its place as the most prestigious book prize, and it allows another prize, perhaps a prize that doesn't yet exist, to fill this space of a book prize that balances craft and innovation. And the Booker has always looked for both of those things, not one or the other. And that is why I am really disappointed with this year's Booker shortlist and long list. And because I know this video has upset people, I'm going to double down and really hit home with some home truths. Tea should be drunk without milk. Pineapple on pizza is amazing. We need more bike lanes. Cauliflower anything is an abomination. Cats are more intelligent than dogs, and they're cleaner. They're still a shitter pet. Parking inspectors are going to hell. Dark chocolate is better. White chocolate is rubbish. Any chef that mixes white chocolate and raspberries should be assigned one of the deepest layers of hell. I'd love to thank all my wonderful Patreons for their support. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.